Hello and welcome to another video. This is about labor and wages. We will be solving a 6-mark analysis question from paper 2 of the O-levels economics paper. And this question applies to Premier League footballers. So it's going to be interesting stuff. I am Mohammad Raza. Let's start today's lesson. The question profile is simple. It's question 2C of variant 2.1 May-June 2018. The topic is occupation and wages from the syllabus. The question is of 6 marks, and this question would judge your knowledge and analysis. So the assessment objectives judged would be AO1 and AO2. This question is not very difficult. It's a pretty straightforward question if you understand what and how is wage determined. This should not be an issue. Yes, as far as I am concerned, it is important. You would be doing yourself a big disservice and putting yourself at a big risk if you enter the examination without knowing about this question or topic. Key concepts to know before solving the question is demand and supply of labor, factors which affect demand and supply of labor, wage determination, factors which affect wage. The question is analyze why Premier League footballers receive very high wages. It's of 6 marks. The components of marks are 2 marks for knowledge, which means of identifying the reason, and 4 marks of explaining the reasons. So before we dig into the meat of the question, let's understand what or who are Premier League footballers. These are some of them. I don't own the pictures. They are taken from open source. This is Ozil, starting from left to right. Then we have Fabregas, and this is my personal favorite. I'm old, guys. I'm sorry. So Eric Cantona has got to be the definitive Manchester United player for me. Then, of course, GOAT, Mr. Messi, and of course Hazard from Real Madrid. So these are some of the footballers. They're highly skilled. You see them on TV and on different merchandise, widely followed. So what are some of the characteristics of the footballers? They are highly skilled. They are limited in supply, because of high training costs and everything, and high training time. They are widely watched. Soccer is a sport, or football is a sport, which is followed all around the world. High wages, of course, since their skills are in high demand, they are given a high wage. They're extremely trained, and of course they may be prone to injuries because of the time they spend on the field. When you start a question like this, it's always good to have a start and finish. You may not need to write this in your paper, but it's always good to understand how to start a question and how to finish a question. So I start my question start a point by writing Premier League footballers, and I have to finish on the point, why do they receive very high wages? So everything I do in between will be to connect these two, Premier League footballers and receive very high wages. So let's start. The first point, Premier League footballers need high levels of skills and long periods of training. This is knowledge and understanding. What happens because of that? The long periods of training reduces the supply of Premier League footballers. Since they take a long time in being trained, there aren't many footballers available to play in the Premier Leagues. What does this do? Since supply of Premier League football is low as compared to the demand, they receive very high wages. So now I'm analyzing that they take a lot. First of all, I state that they take a lot of time in being trained and attaining proper skills. Because of that time, the supply is lower than the demand, and hence the wage which they receive is higher. So I get 1 mark for knowledge and 2 marks for analysis, because I've identified 2 analysis points. Second point, Premier League footballers have a high derived demand. Derived demand means demand which is dependent on something else. Petrol is a derived demand on the sale of cars. The more the number of cars, the higher the sale of petrol. So Premier League footballers have a high derived demand. Why? Because Premier League football is a widely watched sport by spectators in stadiums and on TVs all across the world. Which means since there is a high demand for football, there is a high derived demand for Premier League footballers. Hence, they receive very high wages. So, one mark for identifying that they have high derived demand, and then I explain it by explaining what is derived demand and why is it high. Because people watch in matches and on TV all across the world. There's a high demand for football, hence there is a high demand for footballers. Now, if you ask me, you are okay if you write 2 points like this, but usually when we write, we are not as skillful, and sometimes we tend to miss on a few points. So it's always better to include an additional point. You may not get anything for it, but it is in case if some of your earlier points are not graded appropriately, then this new point could be awarded new marks. So this point is optional. You may not write it or you may not go through it, but it's always good to write something extra. So Premier League footballers are prone to injury on the playing field, right? So this may shorten their careers and may increase expenses of healthcare. So the more the chances of getting injured, the higher the risk of an expensive healthcare, which means that to compensate for this risk, Premier League footballers receive very high wages. To cover this cost of healthcare and the cost of a shortened career, they receive very high wages. So this is optional. For this you get 3 marks, 1 mark for knowledge and 2 marks for analysis. But I am marking this in yellow because to me this is optional. So let's understand how do we get marks. If I write 2 points, for the first point I get 1 mark for knowledge and 2 marks for analysis. Then for the second point I get the same. So I am pretty happy that I have got 6 marks. And 6 are the total number of marks I could get. Keywords and concepts used in the solution are training, supply of labor. You need to understand or go through the text of what it means. Demand for labor, what are the factors which affect the demand for labor? Wage determination, how is the equilibrium wage determined? Derived demand, I just explained this in the video, but it will be good if you go through the concept again. Risks, and I hope this helps. This brings us to the end. Please like the video if you've enjoyed and let us know your feedback. Thank you.